On Christmas morning, while everyone else was laughing and passing gifts around, my parents praised my brother like he was the second coming. But when I opened my gift, I realized they had betrayed me in a way I'll never forget. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lauren Miller. I'm 27, and I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio. My brother Caleb is 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he was the one who could do no wrong. When we were kids, I thought it was normal. Maybe he was just more talented, or maybe I needed to try harder. That's what my parents always said. If Caleb brought home a B, it was because the teacher was unfair. If I brought home an A-, it was because I got distracted. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. Somehow, I always fell short. As we grew older, the pattern stayed the same. Caleb got into trouble a few times in high school, but my parents brushed it off as boys being boys. When I stayed late for school clubs or worked part-time to save money, they acted like I was avoiding family. By the time college came, I worked 2 jobs to pay for everything: textbooks, rent, food, while Caleb had everything covered. My parents told me that he needed support to focus, even though he spent half the semester partying and skipping classes. Still, I tried not to resent him. I convinced myself that once we became adults, things would finally feel equal. But adulthood didn't fix anything. Caleb drifted from job to job, always quitting or getting let go. But my parents explained every failure like it wasn't his fault. Meanwhile, I kept building my own life. I worked long shifts, saved every dollar I could, and finally reached a place where I felt proud of myself. I bought my own car, paid off loans, and even got engaged to someone who truly valued me. I thought my parents would see that and maybe, for once, appreciate the woman I had become. Christmas was supposed to be our big family day. I walked into the house with a hopeful feeling, thinking this year would be different. But the moment Caleb walked in late, my parents lit up like they hadn't seen sunlight in months. They asked him a dozen questions, complimented his clothes, made him a plate before anyone else, and talked about him like he was some rising star everyone should admire. I sat there smiling politely, pretending it didn't sting. I told myself it was just their way of showing love, that it didn't mean I mattered any less, that I had no idea what was coming. I didn't know that sitting under that tree was a small box holding the kind of truth that doesn't just hurt. It changes how you see everything you grew up believing. I didn't know that one gift would show me exactly where I stood in my own family. And I didn't know that opening it would mark the beginning of everything that came after. Growing up, the differences between how my parents treated Caleb and how they treated me became clearer every year. When he turned 16, they surprised him with a used car, acting like it was the greatest milestone in our family. When I turned 16, they told me a car was too big of an expense, and that learning responsibility would be good for me. I took 2 buses to school and worked weekends until I could buy a cheap old car myself. They called it independence, but deep down, I knew it was just another way Caleb was put above me. College didn't help either. When Caleb failed classes, my parents said he was under too much pressure and needed support. They would reassure him for hours, telling him he was smart and capable, and that everything would work out. When I struggled, even a little, they told me to focus, push harder, and stop complaining. They said I was strong enough to handle it, which I guess should have felt like a compliment. But it always felt more like an excuse to give Caleb more than he earned while expecting me to never slip. Even with all that, I kept showing up. I came home for holidays, I helped when they needed errands done, and I called regularly. I didn't want to lose my family over favoritism. I kept hoping that someday they would see that I was doing my best too, that I wasn't trying to compete with Caleb. I just wanted to be treated fairly. This year felt important to me. It was the first time in my life that I felt stable. I had finally paid off most of my student loans. I had a job I worked hard for. I had some savings. And I was engaged to Evan, someone who supported me in every way my parents never really had. I thought maybe my parents would see all of that and finally be proud of me, even if just a little. Evan encouraged me to stay hopeful. He kept saying that parents eventually come around when they see their child building a life they can stand behind. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to walk into Christmas morning and feel like I belonged in the same way Caleb always had. Part of me wondered if being engaged, being financially stable, and being settled would finally shift something in their eyes. So when we drove to my parents' house that morning, I held on to the thought that this Christmas would be different. That maybe, after all the years of being pushed to the side, they would look at me and see someone they could appreciate. Someone who deserved more than just a polite nod or a brief comment. I didn't expect praise or gifts or some dramatic change. I just wanted a sign that they noticed the person I had become. But I didn't know that the imbalance I grew up with hadn't changed at all. I didn't know that this Christmas would show me exactly where I stood, and that the gap between me and Caleb wasn't closing. It was about to get even wider. Caleb walked in almost an hour late, pushing the door open like he was making some grand entrance. He wasn't carrying anything, not even a small gift bag, but my parents reacted as if a celebrity had shown up. My mom rushed over to hug him. My dad clapped him on the back, and the room instantly shifted to revolve around him. Evan squeezed my hand gently, and I just smiled, pretending I wasn't surprised. This was normal. Caleb started talking loudly about nothing important. Traffic, the weather, a random guy he saw at the gas station. And my parents hung on to every word. Then my dad said, "We are so proud of you, son." That promotion was well-deserved. My mom nodded along, adding, "Your future is so bright. You've always been destined for big things." I stared at Caleb, waiting to see if he'd correct them. He didn't. He didn't even look guilty. He just grinned, acting like their words were true. But I knew what they didn't. Caleb had been fired 3 months ago after ignoring warnings at work. He told me himself, in one of the rare moments when he wasn't trying to act superior. He said he'd figure something out, and asked me not to tell our parents because he didn't want to hear a lecture. But apparently, he had no problem letting them brag about a promotion that never existed. A part of me wanted to say something, to gently steer the conversation away, or maybe just drop a hint that things weren't what they thought. But I kept quiet. I didn't want to ruin the morning or create tension in front of Evan. I told myself Christmas didn't need to turn into a fight. All families had their issues, and ours was favoritism, a painful one but familiar. Caleb kept the act going. He talked about big plans, new opportunities, and exciting projects, all vague but impressive sounding. My parents soaked it up, asking questions, offering advice, and telling him how grateful they were to have a son like him. Meanwhile, I sat there holding the small box they had handed me earlier, waiting for my turn to open it later. When my mom finally looked my way, she asked about my job in the same tone someone uses when asking about the weather. Polite, quick, and forgettable. I answered simply, not wanting to seem jealous or bitter. I wasn't. I just wished they could show even half the enthusiasm they showed Caleb for things I actually worked hard for. As Caleb continued his stories, the living room felt smaller, like all the air was drawn toward him. Evan leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded because there was no point complaining. This dynamic wasn't new. I had learned to accept it, or at least tolerate it. My parents believed what they wanted to believe, and Caleb never stopped feeding their illusions. I reminded myself that it was just one day. One holiday. I could get through it by staying calm. I didn't need to expose his lies. I didn't need to correct them. Christmas wasn't the day for truth. Or at least that's what I thought then. I had no idea that truth, real, painful truth, was waiting for me inside a box I still hadn't opened. When it was finally time to open gifts, everyone gathered in the living room. The tree lights were warm, the music was soft, and for a moment I thought things might feel normal. My mom reached for the first gift, but instead of handing it to anyone, she turned to Caleb with a smile that looked almost rehearsed. My dad straightened up, cleared his throat, and suddenly the room felt like a stage. They started talking about Caleb, as if the rest of us weren't even there. My dad said Caleb had worked harder than anyone realizes, and that he was the backbone of this family. My mom chimed in, saying he had sacrificed so much, and that they were grateful every single day for the man he had become. Their voices were full of emotion, almost shaky, like they were delivering some heartfelt tribute. Caleb sat there nodding slowly, pretending to be humble, even though he clearly loved every second of it. I sat beside Evan, trying not to let my face show anything. I didn't want to ruin the mood or make it obvious that I felt like I had disappeared from the room. But it stung. Hearing them praise him in such dramatic words, knowing the truth, made the whole moment feel unreal. Caleb hadn't made sacrifices. He hadn't carried anyone. If anything, the rest of us had always carried him. Yet my parents talked like he had been holding the family together with his bare hands. Everyone else clapped politely when the speech ended, and Caleb laughed like he had just won an award. My dad handed him his gift first, a large box wrapped in silver paper. Caleb tore into it, revealing an expensive leather jacket. My mom explained how they had spent weeks picking it out because he deserved something special. He stood up, tried it on, posed a little, and they showered him with more compliments. I kept telling myself to be patient. I didn't expect a speech or a special moment, but I thought they might at least give a simple acknowledgement of what I had achieved this year. I had built a stable life. I had pushed myself through everything without asking them for help. And this Christmas, I came home hoping they would finally see me. When Caleb finished opening his gifts, my dad looked at me briefly, then reached under the tree and picked up a small box with my name on it. It was so light it barely weighed anything. He handed it to me quickly, without a word, before turning back toward Caleb to ask if the jacket fit comfortably. I sat there holding the box in my lap, waiting for even a small moment where someone might look my way, smile, or say something like, "We're proud of you too, Lauren." But that moment never came. My parents kept talking about Caleb, his job, his future, his plans, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the room. Still, I kept quiet. I kept waiting. I told myself maybe the small box contained something meaningful, something that would show they hadn't forgotten me completely. Maybe the words I needed were written inside. Maybe this was their quiet way of telling me they noticed after all. I didn't know yet that the box I was holding wasn't going to make me feel seen. It was going to do the exact opposite. It was going to show me just how invisible I truly was to them. I finally opened the small box my dad had handed me. It didn't feel like a normal gift, but I tried to stay positive. Inside, there was no jewelry, no note, no keepsake. Just a single folded piece of paper. For a second, I actually felt touched. I thought maybe it was a letter, something personal, something that showed they cared in a quieter way. My grandmother used to leave handwritten notes for me, so the idea warmed me for a moment. But the warmth didn't last. When I unfolded the paper, the words didn't make sense at first. My eyes scanned line after line, trying to understand why there were legal terms and property numbers where heartfelt words should have been. Then it clicked, and everything inside me went still. It was a legal agreement. My parents had transferred the family cabin, completely and permanently, to Caleb. The cabin my grandmother had always promised would belong to both of us. The cabin she said we would share equally, because it was her way of keeping the family together long after she was gone. I stared at the paper, reading every sentence twice. My name wasn't anywhere, not even in a footnote. It was like I never existed. My hands started shaking, and for a moment, I hoped it was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe there was another paper meant for me. Maybe this was a copy they wanted me to read before giving me my own. Anything but what it looked like. I looked up at my parents, waiting for them to explain, but they were already back to talking with Caleb about something unrelated, like giving away the cabin was no big deal. My voice felt stuck in my throat, but I forced myself to ask what the paper meant. My mom turned to me with a soft smile, the kind people use when they're trying to make something hurt less. "Oh, honey, we decided it made more sense for the cabin to go to Caleb," she said, like it was the most logical thing in the world. "You're going to build your life with Evan. You won't need it." My dad added, "Caleb has been through a lot. He needs the stability. And he's always had a special connection to the place." A special connection. The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. Caleb barely visited the cabin. He avoided helping with repairs, always had an excuse not to go, and acted bored every time he did. Meanwhile, I spent entire summers there with my grandmother. I learned how to fix shingles, how to clear the backyard, how to repaint the porch. I knew which boards creaked, which windows stuck, and which trees she planted with her own hands. The cabin wasn't just a building to me. It was a place filled with memories and moments I still carried everywhere. And they handed it over like I had no claim. Like all those years meant nothing. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly but deeply. It was the kind of pain that didn't burn. It chilled. The kind that didn't make you cry right away, because the shock held you still. I folded the paper back up and placed it in the box. For the first time in my life, I realized my parents weren't just playing favorites. They had made a decision that erased me completely. And they expected me to smile and accept it. I sat there quietly while everyone else kept talking and laughing. But inside, something was changing. And once that change started, there was no going back. I sat there holding that small box on my lap, trying to understand how my parents could make such a huge decision without even telling me. I didn't want to cry, and I didn't want to start an argument. So I asked as calmly as I could why they chose to give the cabin only to Caleb when Grandma always said it would be shared. My voice wasn't loud, but the room went quiet for a moment, like everyone was waiting to see how my parents would respond. My mom sighed, like I was asking something unreasonable. She said Caleb needed stability, that life had been harder for him. She talked as if giving him the cabin was some kind of rescue mission. My dad added that a man should have the family property, as if I somehow didn't count. He said it like it was an unspoken rule everyone should understand. Hearing that word, man, hit me harder than I expected. It made it clear that no matter what I achieved, my place in the family would always be second. They kept talking like they were explaining something simple I should already know. My mom said since I was getting married soon, I'd have a house with Evan, so I didn't need the cabin. As if marrying someone meant giving up the things my grandmother wanted me to have. As if my hard work made me less deserving instead of more. I asked them why they had promised for years that the cabin would be shared, why they let me spend all that time repairing it, cleaning it, and keeping it in good shape if they always intended to hand it over to Caleb alone. My dad's face tightened, and he said I was being dramatic. My mom nodded quickly, saying I shouldn't make a big deal out of something that was already decided. They acted like I was ruining Christmas by simply wanting an honest answer. But the worst moment came when I looked at Caleb. He sat there with that irritating smirk he saved for moments when he felt superior. He shrugged and said, "Don't make Christmas about you, Lauren. It's not that deep." That sentence sliced through me more than the paper in the box ever could. He wasn't even grateful. He wasn't surprised. He knew. He knew all along, and he didn't think I deserved to know. I felt a pressure in my chest, like my breath was stuck somewhere between anger and heartbreak. Evan reached for my hand, but I barely noticed. My parents kept talking about the cabin like it was an object they could move around without consequences. They didn't acknowledge my effort, my memories, or the promise my grandmother made. They didn't care how much that place meant to me. They had already decided their version of the story, and I wasn't part of it. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just being overlooked. I had been pushed out completely. They didn't even see it as wrong. They thought their reasons were enough, that their decision couldn't hurt me because they had already convinced themselves it was logical. But behind all their excuses, all their calm explanations, and all their little defenses, one truth hit me harder than anything they said. They chose him. Completely. And they didn't even hesitate. I couldn't stay there any longer. The words my parents had said, Caleb's smirk, the way they treated me like I didn't matter, it was too much. I stood up, holding the box tightly, and walked toward the door. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't care. Evan followed quickly, wrapping his arm around my shoulders as we stepped out into the cold winter air. I could barely speak, but I felt the weight of every unfair thing that had ever happened settle on me all at once. Evan didn't say much at first. He just held me close, letting me cry without judgment. After a few minutes, he finally spoke softly, his voice calm but firm. "Lauren, you need to hear this. The cabin, it can't legally belong to Caleb. Grandma's will has a clause that says both of you have to agree on any transfer. Without your consent, nothing is valid." I froze, gripping the box tighter. "What? Are you serious?" My voice cracked. I didn't want to hope, not after everything, but Evan nodded. "Yes. They can't just give it to him. That paper they gave you? It doesn't matter unless you signed off. And from what you told me, they never asked you to agree." A mixture of relief and anger hit me at the same time. Relief because it meant my grandmother's promise couldn't be taken away so easily. Anger because my parents had gone even further than I imagined. They had forged my signature to make the transfer seem official. My blood boiled thinking about it. They lied. They cheated. They tried to erase me from something that had been mine just as much as Caleb's. Evan held my hand tightly. "We'll fix this, Lauren. You don't have to let them get away with it. We can talk to the lawyer, make sure it's reversed, and stop this before it goes any further." His words grounded me. I realized I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The cold air stung my face, but it felt sharper than the winter wind that my parents' betrayal had cut even deeper. I looked back at the house, at the warm lights glowing inside, and felt a mixture of sadness and determination. Those walls had held so many memories, and I had spent years caring for the cabin, but my parents had tried to rewrite history. They had expected me to accept it quietly like I always did. But this time I couldn't. I wouldn't. The tears on my cheeks were gone, replaced by a steady resolve. I knew exactly what needed to happen. I would get the truth out. I would protect what was rightfully mine. And this time no one, not my parents, not Caleb, no one, could stop me. That walk in the snow felt like the first step toward taking back everything they had tried to steal from me. For the first time, I felt in control, and for the first time in years, I knew that the power was finally mine. The next morning, I called the lawyer who had handled my grandmother's will. His office was quiet when I explained everything: the box, the papers, the transfer to Caleb. I could hear him pause on the other end of the line, and then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Lauren, this is serious. What your parents and Caleb did could be illegal." I felt a rush of both fear and relief. Fear because I realized just how far they had gone to erase me, and relief because it finally meant there might be a way to fight back. The lawyer told me to bring all the documents, the box, and anything I had that showed my grandmother's original wishes. He promised to investigate immediately. Over the next few days, the lawyer dug into the paperwork. What he found shocked me. My parents and Caleb had secretly filed documents claiming I had abandoned all interest in the cabin. They had done it without telling me, and they had falsified my signature to make it appear legal. It was a clear lie. Worse, it was a serious offense, something that could have had legal consequences for both of them. I couldn't believe it. They had spent years letting me work on that cabin, teaching me responsibility and care, making me believe it was mine just as much as Caleb's, and then tried to erase me from it completely. All those memories, all that effort, they thought they could just take it from me. And for what? Because they decided Caleb needed it more? Because I was getting married and they thought I didn't matter? Sitting there with Evan, I realized I couldn't let it go. I had spent my whole life trying to keep the peace, trying not to upset my parents, trying not to make Caleb feel uncomfortable. I had smiled when they ignored me, I had stayed silent when they gave him praise I deserved, and I had held back my tears when they handed me that piece of paper. Not anymore. I made up my mind. I wasn't going to stay quiet. I wasn't going to let them rewrite my grandmother's wishes, and I wasn't going to let them erase my years of hard work and memories. I wanted the truth out. I wanted justice. I wanted them to see that their favoritism, their lies, and their betrayal had consequences. The lawyer assured me he would handle everything carefully, and that the first step was to formally challenge the transfer. I felt a small spark of hope. The kind you feel when you realize that someone finally believes you, when someone sees the injustice and is willing to fight it with you. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a real chance to take back what was mine. Not just the cabin, but my sense of fairness, my dignity, and the respect I deserved. This wasn't just about a property anymore. It was about standing up for myself and making sure my parents and Caleb understood that I would no longer be invisible. I looked at Evan and smiled, a little shakily, but with determination. "Let's do this," I said. And in that moment, I knew my revenge had officially begun. A few days later, the lawyer called with updates. The transfer to Caleb was canceled. The official notices made it clear. The cabin legally remained mine and Caleb's jointly, just as my grandmother intended. An inquiry was also being opened into the forged documents, and if Caleb didn't cooperate, he could face serious charges. Hearing this, I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because justice was finally catching up, and anger because my parents had gone so far to betray me. That evening, my parents confronted me in the living room, their faces full of panic and disbelief. My mom kept saying, "Lauren, you're making this worse than it needs to be," while my dad added, "We only wanted what was best for Caleb." I took a deep breath, feeling years of hurt and frustration building inside me. It was finally time to speak. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I just spoke clearly, every word carrying the weight of years of being overlooked. That I told them how I had grown up feeling invisible, how Caleb was always praised while my achievements were minimized. I reminded them of the car they gave him at 16 while I had to work for mine. I spoke about college, about how they excused his failures but criticized mine. I talked about every gift they gave him that made me feel small, and every lie they told about the cabin. I told them how it felt to be erased from something that had been as much mine as his. Caleb tried to speak, blaming them instead. "It wasn't me," he said, shrugging. "It's their decision." But they turned to him, trying to shift the blame back. "It's not just my fault," my mom said. "You encouraged this too." For the first time, the golden child image started to crack. The perfect act, the smug smile, the unearned praise. It all began to falter. I watched as they stumbled over their excuses, trying to defend a decision that couldn't be defended. The wall of favoritism that had protected Caleb for so long started to crumble. Their voices grew defensive, but they couldn't deny the facts. They had forged my signature. They had lied to me. They had tried to give him everything while pretending I didn't matter. Evan stood beside me quietly, holding my hand. I felt stronger with him there. I realized that I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their praise. I needed the truth to be known, and now it was. Caleb shifted uncomfortably as the reality set in. His smug confidence faded, replaced by tension. He had relied on their protection for too long, and now the shield was gone. My parents had to face the consequences of their choices. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure building in the room. The air felt heavier but honest. The past couldn't be erased, but the truth had finally come out. I didn't feel victorious in a loud way, but quietly, firmly, I knew the balance had shifted. The Golden Child Act had cracked, and for the first time, I was finally being seen. In the weeks that followed, everything began to settle. The lawyer confirmed that the cabin was officially mine and Caleb's, just as my grandmother had intended. There was no more room for lies or forged papers. Holding the legal documents in my hands felt like holding a piece of my childhood back, a piece of my life my parents had tried to take away. I finally felt a sense of justice, quiet but strong, settling in my chest. I made a decision then. I wasn't going to keep enabling the same family dynamics that had caused me so much pain. I wouldn't compete for approval, and I wouldn't allow favoritism to rule my life anymore. My focus turned to my own life, my fiancé Evan, and the future we were building together. The cabin would stay as a place of memories, but it would also become a symbol of my strength and independence. My parents tried to reach out after everything. My mom called and said, "Lauren, come back. It's Christmas. For the sake of family." My dad followed with, "We just want things to be normal again." But I realized that returning to their version of normal would mean accepting their lies and ignoring all the years of favoritism and betrayal. I couldn't do that. I couldn't give them my peace and my trust when they had already shown they didn't value it. I politely, but firmly, told them that until they could acknowledge the truth and take responsibility, there was no returning. Their silence in the face of their actions made the decision easier. Evan stood by me through it all. He reminded me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who treat you with respect and love. Together, we focused on the life we were building, the home we were creating, and the values we wanted to carry forward. The pain of my parents' betrayal didn't vanish overnight, but with each day, I felt lighter, freer, and more in control of my life. The cabin, once a source of heartbreak, became a place I could reclaim on my terms. I walked through it, remembering the summers the first spent there with my grandmother, the afternoons fixing the roof, painting the walls, and learning lessons she wanted me to carry forever. Now, every nail, every floorboard, and every tree in the yard stood as a testament to my efforts, my patience, and my resilience. I want anyone reading this to understand something I learned the hard way. Sometimes the only way to protect your heart is to stop giving it to people who never deserved it. Family, blood, or otherwise, doesn't automatically earn your loyalty or your trust. You have to choose who you let in, who you care for, and who you allow to shape your life. I kept the cabin. I kept my dignity. And I kept my peace. In the end, that was worth more than anything my parents could have given or taken from me. I finally learned that standing up for yourself, even against the people you love most, is not cruel. It's necessary. And that truth, as painful as it may be, is also freeing.